Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Welcome to another episode of Haqiqatjou, where we discuss religion and politics, the two least controversial subjects. As always, I'm your host, Daniel Haqiqatjou, and today we are going to be discussing a lot of history and geopolitics and current events, and really getting into depth on a topic that many of you have requested, which is the current civil conflict in Sudan. A lot of people are not really clear on what is happening in Sudan. This is a conflict that has been happening since 2021, and a lot of Sudanese Muslims have died, have been killed. There are over 10 million refugees, nearly 13 million refugees. And so this is a massive humanitarian crisis, and we as Muslims need to really understand, because first and foremost, these are Muslims mainly who are being killed, who are suffering. And there's a lot of ugliness in this conflict because there's a long history of genocide, long history of racial killing, targeted ethnic racial killing, Muslim on Muslim genocide and killing that has, soaked the history of Sudan in blood. And so this is quite a significant thing that's been happening in Africa, and it concerns the entire ummah, but people aren't really clear on what is going on, who's involved, what is the history, who's exacerbating the bloodshed when it comes to the Sudanese. So we need to talk about this, inshallah. I'm also going to talk about the Rohingya on the other side of the world in Myanmar and the refugee crisis, because this is not exactly the same, but there are a lot of similarities in the crisis in Myanmar with the Rohingya Muslims in the Rakhine province, and hundreds of thousands of refugees that have migrated to Bangladesh to escape massacres and genocide and rape. This is another humanitarian crisis, and what's happening currently is that this is the 8th anniversary of the massacres and genocide that the military junta in Myanmar have committed in 2017 against the Rohingya, that initiated the migration, the refugee crisis of the Rohingya Muslims migrating to, many of them, to Bangladesh. And now they are suffering because the humanitarian aid is running out. The transitional government of Bangladesh is having difficulty supporting these refugees in the southeast of the country. And there's renewed conflict. There's renewed killing by factions within the Myanmar, not the military junta that initiated the massacres in 2017, but another faction in the same Rakhine province in the western side, coastal side of Myanmar. So we're going to look at the map. We're going to talk about that history as well, and we're going to see a lot of parallels with Muslims who become the victims of ethnic-based, racial-based genocide and killing, how civil wars and conflict between civilian governments and military factions result in constant coups, violence, civil war, civil strife, and Muslims are often the victims. And what are the geopolitical factors that play into this? How countries around the world come and exacerbate the conflicts, whether it's in Sudan, whether it's in Myanmar, whether it's in Bangladesh, whether it's in Syria, Yemen. Outside actors, based on their geopolitical interests, intervene and they arm the groups that they want in power for their own geopolitical interests, and they exacerbate, they put fuel on the fire of killing and massacres, and this is contributing to the disaster. And who suffers? It's innocent Muslims who are suffering. So we need to speak out on their behalf. And unfortunately, what you see it in online is paid influencers. Paid influencers who are literally being paid a check, a paycheck, to represent a specific side, a specific country, a specific ethnic group. And who is out there that's really supporting the Muslim interests? Who is really there to support the voiceless Muslims who are the victims of these crimes, of these genocides? Instead, you see paid influencer campaigns where states, like whether it be the United States, whether it be Israel, whether it be the UAE and the Gulf countries, whether it be Russia, whether it be China, whether it be Turkey, whether it be Qatar, they are paying money to represent their specific national interests. Not necessarily the interests of the Muslims, not necessarily the interests of the victims who have no money. They have no resources to pay for an influencer campaign to represent their side. And what ends up happening is oftentimes you have these Western humanitarian groups, these leftist groups, these liberal groups who are representing the voiceless Muslims. And that becomes a problem in many ways. It becomes a problem because they're not always unbiased. They do have a bias against Muslims. They also push a liberal message, a feminist message, a pro-LGBT message. Yeah, we're going to support the voiceless Muslims of Darfur, for example, in Western Sudan, or the Rohingya. We're going to represent them. But it's coming with a lot of baggage. It's coming with a lot of liberal baggage that is contrary to Islam. And this puts Muslims in a bind. It makes it difficult for Muslims to get fully behind the liberal campaign, the liberal humanitarian campaign, even though that campaign is representing Muslims in the sense that it's advocating for humanitarian reasons. But it's coming with all this kind of liberal baggage. And the same situation is, a microcosm of that is happening in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh has limited resources. And then you have international groups. You have UN-tied groups, NGOs who want to come and provide the aid. They want to provide humanitarian relief. But it's coming with strings attached. It's coming with, okay, you're inviting the influence of a liberal behemoth, this liberal infrastructure to come and set up shop in your country to provide the aid, but they're going to also be pushing for feminism. They're going to be pushing all of these kinds of women empowerment programs. They're going to really be pushing for kind of dissolution of the Sharia and Islamic law. So this is the kind of balancing act that Muslims have to navigate, and it's unfortunate. So on our behalf, like on behalf of MuslimSkeptic, we're trying to, and we've always been trying to do this, to speak on behalf of Muslim victims, the interests of the Ummah first and foremost, for the sake of Allah. That has been always our priority, not to represent any kind of partisan national interest or specific country. And my record is very clear. You can see my record, whether it's MuslimSkeptic.com, the kinds of things that we publish, the channel. We're approaching almost 1,000 videos on this channel. And whenever we get into politics, you can see like what exactly, you can see the trends. Who do I criticize? Who do I hold accountable? The record should be clear that we don't have any kind of partisanship or national we're not beholden to any government, basically, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, and I invite you to evaluate that for yourself. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. Just a reminder to subscribe to the channel. Like the video. If you enjoy this type of content, you like this type of analysis, prove it by actually liking, engaging in the chat, leaving a comment. This is going to help boost these types of videos, and I can see very clearly, okay, based on the reaction to this video, this is something more and more people are interested in, then we'll put more content out there. So if this is something that you enjoy, and you find beneficial, don't forget to engage with the video. Also, subscribe to the newsletter. You can find the link to the newsletter below. Really helps us out if you put your email, a valid email, and subscribe to that. Again, like the email newsletter is something that we're not putting out regularly. I'll be honest with you. Like, we're not putting out regularly, but I do have the intention of putting out regular beneficial content through the newsletter, giving you updates and other valuable things that you'd be interested in. So sign up now and you won't have to worry about it, inshallah. What about other updates of the channel? A lot of upcoming debates that I'm going to be engaged with in the coming weeks. I'm going to be debating at least one, maybe two Jews about Israel. So we're going to talk to a couple of Jews and debate them. That should be very interesting. I have a couple of debates coming up in November at the DebateCon, Modern Day Debate Conference. That's going to be happening in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to be debating two Christians. That should be interesting. Andrew Wilson and Robert Spencer, and two topics that you haven't seen me debate before. And that, if you want to attend that conference in person, be sure to check out the Modern Day Debate channel, and you'll see in the description the link to get tickets. And I love to see Muslims at these events in person because it's mostly non-Muslims. And they heckle me and they create a very hostile environment. That's fine. I'm used to it. Maybe you saw in the previous David Wood debate how hostile the Christian audience was in a church. So I'm often debating in enemy territory. I'm a visitor, on enemy territory, and I have to debate. I get heckled. But it would be nice to see more Muslims. Some Muslims do come for all of these in-person debates, but it's a minority, and I really appreciate that. So if you're interested to come to Nashville, or you're in Nashville, then check out Modern Day Debates for the location information, ticket information. And what else? I also challenged this guy, Avery, GodLogic, who has been doing a lot of yapping. Let's be honest. He's a yapper. He likes to talk a lot. He likes to trash talk. But I don't see him backing up that trash talk very often. So he had a lot to say about my debate with David Wood on the so-called Islamic dilemma, what I've termed the autistic dilemma. So I challenged Avery. I said, look, Avery, earlier today, you have a lot of yapping that you're doing. Put your money where your mouth is and debate me on the autistic dilemma. Let's do it, a moderated debate, and we'll see what he says. And I want to do this now. I want to do this debate like yesterday. It needs to happen. No stalling, no delaying. Within a couple of weeks, let's have this debate on this dilemma. You have debated it before. You pretty much 90% of your content this year has been on the autistic dilemma, so you should have no need to prepare for this. And you did a lot of yapping. You did a lot of yapping about the David Wood debate. So clearly you're an expert. So get on stage and let's have a debate, virtually moderated, and put your money where your mouth is, Avery. I want to see you in this debate, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. It should be fun. It should be interesting. So that's what's coming up. Wahhabism. Basically, the second part of our documentary is coming up. It's a continuation. It's getting more into the ilmi side, critiquing Wahhabism as a war against the four Sunni schools, the legal schools. Hanbali, Shafi'i, Hanafi, and Maliki. Because these Wahhabis claim that they don't have a problem with Sunnism. They claim that they're Sunni, that they're part of the Hanbali school, but these are lies. These are lies, and we're going to show and expose these lies and the secrets that Wahhabis are hiding from the public to perpetuate this charade, this hoax that Wahhabis are actually Sunnis. We've dedicated ourselves and the channel to exposing this because Wahhabism has proved itself since October 7th to be a cancer against the Ummah. Wahhabis have proven themselves over and over and over again to be a tool used by the enemies of Islam against the Muslims. So we have to cut off this limb, this sick, toxic, poisoned limb in order to save the body. So we're going to continue our exposure of Wahhabism. This second part of the documentary or continuation is going to come out hopefully, possibly as late as the end, or early as the end of this week, or early next week. It's going to come out, and from what I can tell, it's going to be very polished. It's going to be very well produced. You know, the editor is doing a really good job, and these Wahhabis are going to speculate that, oh, this is this is so well produced, it must have been made by the CIA. The CIA is putting out these videos through MuslimSkeptic. That's probably what they're going to claim, because they keep getting destroyed by the Wahhabism documentary, which is almost 500,000 views after just a couple of months. So, subhanAllah. This next part is going to be just as explosive. You'll definitely want to watch it. So subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so that you get informed, and you'll be able to see it on the channel, inshallah. Okay, so let's get into these conflicts, Sudan and also Myanmar. And again, as you'll see, there's a lot of parallels when it comes to these conflicts. There's also differences, significant differences, but let's try to focus on the recurring patterns, because this is a situation that needs to be addressed. The Ummah needs to address this and find solutions to these problems. We can't keep falling into these civil conflicts. We can't continue to be victims of civil war. These kinds of ethnic cleansing campaigns by an ethnic majority against a minority. This is something that needs a solution. And if the Ummah is really going to be able to advance in the 21st century, or the 15th Islamic Hijri century, we have to be able to have solutions to this recurring pattern, this recurring problem that's been happening since the colonial period and since the independence period in the mid-20th century. We need to find solutions, and it's up to the next generation, our generation and the next generation of Muslim youth, to think critically and understand why these conflicts happen and how to solve them. This is one of the biggest needs that the Ummah has. One of the biggest needs is figuring out the Zionist question and the greater Israel problem. That is, near the top of the list. Liberalism is something else that needs to be addressed. The ideological challenge of liberalism, modernism, and progressivism, that's at the top of the list. And also at the top of the list is this recurring pattern of Muslims becoming en masse victims of genocide. And there's no political solution. There's no military solution. Muslims just keep getting played, and it's the powerless, the poor, who become victims again and again, and all over the world. This is something that needs to be solved, and we can't solve it unless we analyze it on our own terms, not on the terms of some liberal humanitarian organizations. Okay, so that's the overarching theme and my pitch to why this is significant. And even if you didn't have an interest in Sudan before, if you didn't have interest in Myanmar before, and the historical details that I'm going to get into on this stream, then this is my pitch for why you should pay attention, because you and me will be held accountable by Allah for what we did or did not do to address these challenges and to help. We will be held accountable because we have resources. We have a physical body, we have a mind, we have a tongue, we can speak out, we have hands that can do, who can build, who can solve. So what are you going to do to solve this recurring problem of humanitarian disaster and ethnic cleansing affecting Muslims? What am I going to do? This is, our akhirah is at stake on these issues. And it's not just Palestine. Palestine is the main, right now, the main issue, and it's been the main issue since 1948. But there are these other conflicts as well that we have to pay attention to, and we'll see patterns. We'll see that a lot of the same actors are involved. So we and geopolitics, the logic of geopolitics is involved. So we need to understand this. Okay. Let's start with Darfur. The Darfur conflict, because this is really the people who are involved in Sudan right now when it comes to the two sides of the conflict. Neither side is good. Neither side are people that we should support. Neither side, or can we say, is fighting for the cause of Muslims. They're both morally compromised. One worse than others, but they're both extremely problematic. Why? Because they were both involved in the genocide in Darfur. And so where is Darfur? Let's look at a map and orient ourselves. So this is Omar al-Bashir, who was for 30 years the dictator, and a very brutal dictator of Sudan. And he was ousted in 2019. There was a coup in 2019 that ousted him. And the two groups, or the two individuals that ousted him, I have their pictures, so hold on, are these two: Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who is also known as Hamedi. He is the general who is in charge of the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, and al-Burhan is the Sudanese Armed Forces. These are the two individuals that couped Omar Bashir in 2019. Then in 2021, al-Burhan and Hamedi, they couped, or after they had couped Omar Bashir, they began fighting. They began fighting in Khartoum, in the capital, and that it's their power struggle that is causing, for the past 4 years, the humanitarian crisis, 13 million refugees, tens of thousands of deaths, a worsening humanitarian crisis. It is because of the power struggle between these two individuals and the SAF and the RSF. But so who should Muslims support? Neither of these individuals are the good guys, is what I'm telling you. And Omar Bashir is certainly not the good guy either, or wasn't. He wasn't the good guy either. He committed a genocide against African Muslims in Darfur and the western side of Sudan. So if we go to a map of Sudan, you can see that Sudan was broken up into South Sudan and Sudan in the north. So South Sudan is where most of the Christians are, African Christians and other ethnicities and religions as well, animists as well. And this northern part with Khartoum, that's where the Arab Sudanese are located, and they've been in power, obviously. But you have more ethnic divisions because in the western side of Sudan, this is Darfur. Let me get a pen. This area is Darfur, and a genocide was committed between 2003 and 2008, and it was an ethnic genocide because it was black Sunni Muslims that were being genocided by Omar Bashir's forces, an Arab Sudanese force against the Muslims in Darfur. This is significant because this is a Sunni on Sunni genocide, and we don't really hear about it. We didn't hear about it at the time in 2003 and 2008. Some of us maybe were too young, or we weren't connected. That was a time before social media. That was a time before social media had really taken off in the way that it is now. You couldn't really share videos in the same way that you can share videos now. Not that there would be many videos, but there wasn't as much news coverage in the West, and many Muslims really weren't aware that 300,000 African Sunni Muslims were being massacred through these forces, the Omar Bashir forces in Sudan. And the people that were really in charge of taking orders from Omar Bashir and conducting this genocide was Hamadi, who was heading the Janjaweed militias. And al-Burhan, he wasn't at the highest level of the Sudanese army at that point, but he was one of the officials, and he was involved working alongside the Janjaweed militias against these African Muslims. Now, why is Darfur important? Because Darfur has a lot of resources. Darfur has a lot of gold mines. A lot of gold wealth is located in this part of Sudan. And so that's why these people are getting massacred for control of these mines. And there's other factors as well. So this is 2003 to 2008. In 2019, Omar Bashir is ousted through a coup by his own generals. Al-Burhan and Hamadi as well turns on Omar Bashir, and they take power in 2019. And then 2021, they start fighting each other. And this is what has created the crisis. Now, since 2021, the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, led by Hamadi, have been very successful in controlling Khartoum. Khartoum is right on the Nile. It's the capital. And they have been able to control most of the western side of Sudan. And this has created the refugee crisis. So a lot of refugees are escaping to surrounding countries. This has created a refugee crisis in the surrounding countries. And they're very brutal. They are just conducting massacres. They cut off aid. They cut off any kind of food. So there's famine that's created. And this is a massive humanitarian crisis. The SAF, the Sudanese armed forces, have been pushed back. And their base of operations has been in the port of Sudan. And the port of Sudan is extremely significant geopolitically for reasons I'll explain. So the SAF has been, with Al-Burhan, has been in the east. The RSF has been in the west, and they've controlled Khartoum. But things have really turned around starting in 2024. Starting last year, SAF has made a counter response. They've been able to push back. They have retaken Khartoum, and now RSF is on the back foot. RSF is now facing a lot of problems. Why? Because SAF is now getting more support. The surrounding countries, like Ethiopia, like Egypt, is now providing more resources to SAF. And also Turkey, also Iran are providing drones. And RSF doesn't have the same kind of drone capabilities. So SAF, using drones, are able to have a qualitative military advantage over RSF. And this has turned things around. Now SAF has retaken Khartoum. And now it's the situation is RSF is vulnerable, but they still control the western part of the country. So this is where the situation stands today in 2025. And who is suffering, who continues to suffer because of this conflict? It's the average Sudanese Muslims, whether they're African or whether they're Arab. Now, who's supporting RSF? Who is supporting RSF? It's the UAE. And the title of this live stream was UAE Unleashes the e-girls, the e-girl influencers online to paint the SAF as Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan, terrorists who are killing and raping and pillaging. That's how they're depicting SAF. And we'll see the irony of this kind of accusation in a second, because who was the UAE supporting when it came to the Darfur massacres, when it came to Omar Bashir? Who was the UAE supporting? Who was the UAE supporting in the coup in 2019? Spoiler alert, they were supporting the same people that they're calling Ikhwan now. The same people that they're calling Ikhwan now, like Al-Burhan, they were supporting in the coup in 2019 against Omar Bashir, and even before that. So that's the dishonesty of the UAE. But the point is that the RSF is supported by the UAE. Why? Here now, if we look at this area of the map, like why is the UAE so involved in this conflict? What does the UAE gain? Like, what is the UAE's interest in backing the RSF and Hamedi? And it's an interesting history. There are several geopolitical concerns here. The most immediate one is that the RSF is a kind of paramilitary force. They're a paramilitary force, and they're extremely brutal, but they're organized and they're very loyal. They have a strong structure. And in 2015, the RSF was primarily constituting the troops that Sudan was sending to Yemen to fight the Houthis. So Saudi and the UAE, there was a coalition against the Houthis in Yemen, and Omar Bashir was sending troops to back the Saudi UAE coalition against the Houthis in Yemen. And so this was what was actually taking place on the ground, is that the ground forces, when it came to the Saudi UAE coalition, was made of Sudanese fighters from the RSF. You think that when Saudi and the UAE fights a war, they're sending Emiratis or they're sending any kind of Saudi, like ethnic Saudi, to fight in these battles? No, they're sending Africans. They're sending the Sudanese, tens of thousands of Sudanese soldiers going from the port of Sudan into Yemen to fight this proxy war on behalf of Saudi and the UAE. So the RSF has become a proxy military force for the UAE to project power in this region, along the Red Sea and within Africa itself. So since 2015, UAE has recognized the value of this paramilitary force. Now, why did they side in 2021 with RSF as opposed to Al Burhan and SAF? It's because our RSF has been more involved. In Yemen, RSF has also control of Western Sudan, where what's located? The gold mines. So these gold mines have become a major economic boon for UAE. It has helped them diversify their economy because now they have access to billions in gold wealth because of their connection to RSF and their sponsorship of RSF. So that's why the UAE has backed RSF. Interestingly, Saudi has tended to back SAF, Al Burhan. So that's we won't get into the reasons for why that's the case, but we have to understand the strategic benefit of controlling Sudan. Whoever controls Sudan is going to have a major geopolitical advantage within two parts of this map. One is obviously the Horn of Africa as a whole. Let's see, you can't really see the horn here. So this is the Horn of Africa. I'll just use green here. So you can see the Horn of Africa is extremely significant for a couple of reasons. One is that this becomes a hub. The Horn of Africa is a hub because so much of Africa's resources are shipped out of Africa through this horn. Why? Because of geography. And you can't see all of Africa, but you have the Sahara Desert. You have the Sahara Desert, and it extends obviously all the way to the west, to Mauritania. And this creates a massive barrier. So if you're in sub-Saharan Africa in one of these countries and you're trying to get material, resources for trade to the Indian Ocean and then through the Red Sea so that you can get to the Mediterranean, to Europe, you have to, the best route is through the Horn of Africa. So whoever has control of the Horn of Africa is able to control a huge portion of the resources of Africa, the economy of all of these African countries, the 54 African countries, 54 or so, at least the ones that are on the eastern side. Then the Horn of Africa is also significant because it is going to create control of, first of all, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait here. Can you see that? The strait, this is a choke point. This is a significant economic choke point, which controls the access to the Red Sea and then access to the Suez Canal and then the Mediterranean. So this choke point is very significant, and you have a massive concentration of military bases along this African coast in these countries like Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somaliland, because you have the U.S. Central Command, African Central Command is located here. China has a base here. Russia has a base here. So this is because everyone understands the strategic importance. So much of global trade depends on this strait, this Bab el-Mandeb. And whoever controls this is going to control a huge portion of the global economy and the connection between the three continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. So you can see that this becomes a very important strategic choke point for Israel as well. Israel also has an interest. As you could have predicted, Israel has an entire Red Sea strategy. They have a Red Sea strategy, which, as you can guess, they know the sensitivity of this port or this strait. And they're now suffering because of the Yemeni naval blockade. The Yemenis, the Houthis, have been blockading primarily this area in the Gulf of Aden, this strait, and preventing any kind of Israeli-affiliated ship from being able to get to the Red Sea and then get to Aqaba, which is their southern port in Israel. So they have suffered economically, and this is something that they want to avoid. So this is why Israel and UAE have such a close connection. Part of why they have such a close connection and a shared security concern is they both want to be able to control the Red Sea. They want to be able to control this Bab el-Mandeb, this strait, so that they can project power into Yemen. They can control these ports, especially the port of SUDAN, which is one of the deep sea ports, one of the major deep sea ports in the Red Sea. And this is their whole Red Sea strategy, to maintain economic control and not have it be threatened by a group like the Houthis, for example. So this is part of why Israel is interested in supporting the UAE and their support of RSF. Israel hasn't been very vocal or public about supporting RSF or supporting the UAE's support of RSF. Why? Because Saudi is aligned more with the SAF, Al-Burhan, and Egypt is more aligned with SAF. So they don't want to create tensions with Saudi and Egypt. So their support is quiet. But that's the geopolitical concern. And overall, Sudan is very significant for Israel, beyond just the Red Sea, beyond just the port of Sudan, beyond just the Sudanese fighters, the RSF fighters going and fighting the Houthis in Yemen. The other significance of Sudan is that Sudan provides support, potential support to Egypt. So it adds strategic depth to Egypt. And of course, Israel prefers all of its neighbors, all the Arab neighbors, to be as weak as possible. So if you can create conflict between Egypt and Sudan, and that's going to ultimately serve the interests of Israel. So RSF, Hamedi is not aligned with Egypt, with Sisi, and so it's also in their interest to support Hamedi to create a rift between Egypt and Sudan. That is also to Israel's advantage. So this is now, hopefully you have more of a background, you have more of a geopolitical understanding of what's happening in Sudan. And now let's play the video. Let's play. Now we're in a better position to judge the lies and the propaganda coming out of the UAE. And I want to share that video with you so we can watch it and have a good laugh. So I'm going to warn you in advance, like, watching this will make you very angry and annoyed. But, I mean, this is what we got to do, right? I have to look at what the enemy is putting out. And I tweeted this because this video was put out on Twitter last week. I tweeted that this is... I thought that the biggest prostitute for the UAE was Rabbi Ferris, but I think this woman might be in second place, or she's making a title run for the most annoying prostitute for the UAE. But let's listen to what she has to say.
Any civilized society, a woman having an opinion is normal. In Sudan, under the Muslim Brotherhood-led army, it is a crime.
So in Sudan, the Muslim Brotherhood-led army of Sudan, women can't voice their opinion. Okay, so so she's referring to who? She's referring to SAF. She's referring to Al Burhan. He's Ikhwani Muslim Brotherhood now.
Let's take my own case. When I spoke about the Hamas of Africa, the drug lord...
The Hamas of Africa. Al Burhan, the one who was complicit in the genocide of 300,000 Darfur Muslims, he's the Hamas of Africa.
Lords who control Port Sudan with the blessings of Colombian cartels and Hezbollah networks, poisoning the region and threatening the international community.
So the SAF, Al Burhan, he is backed by Hezbollah. He's backed by the cartels, the Colombian drug cartels, and he controls Port Sudan. So that's really the sensitive point. Like, again, for the whole Red Sea strategy, for the ability of the UAE to get troops from Sudan into Yemen or wherever else that they need them to be in the Gulf, they're basically militias that the UAE wants to contract. That requires control of Port Sudan. And the SAF controls Port Sudan, so now they're Hezbollah, and now they're Muslim Brotherhood. They're Hamas. There is actually a degree of truth to the fact that prior to 2019, prior to the coup, Iran was smuggling weapons to Hamas through Sudan, through the port of Sudan. They were smuggling weapons into Sudan, which were able to be traveled through Egypt, through the Sinai, and into Gaza. Iran was using that network, but that was back in 2019. And they've had limited ability to smuggle weapons since Sudan has been in this civil conflict. And but this is what she's referring to, but I find it hilarious that she's saying that SAF is the Hamas, the Ikhwan.
What did their defenders do? They debate facts. They counter with knowledge. No. Are
you guys hearing this? Sorry.
Crawled from the shadows and hurled filth instead of arguments. I mean, you gotta hear this. May God give you cancer. Your face is like a mouse. Thank you so much. Prostitute. Slut. You belong in the kitchen. Taste the hell of fire.
I mean,
this is their logic.
So, are you following this? She's talking about, okay, these Sudanese armed forces. They're a Hamas of Africa. They're linked to Hezbollah. She doesn't say Iran specifically, but that's the implication. But now suddenly she's talking about herself like, oh, why are you insulting me? You're telling me to taste the hellfire and I'm a prostitute and go to hell. Like, how did it suddenly become about you? And this is the nature of these female influencers. Like, we're trying to talk about geopolitics. We're trying to talk about a humanitarian crisis. Millions of refugees have been created. And all she's talking about is, oh, they're calling me mean names online. Oh, they're saying I look like a mouse. They say they're making fun of my looks. Why are women like this? Like, why? Who thought that this would be like an effective campaign? And so this is like a 3-minute video. Most of it is just about her complaining that people are making fun of her online and cursing her and attacking her online.
This is their morality. It's not just how they speak to me. It's how they speak to their mothers, to their sisters, their wives. And it mirrors what their army does to women in Sudan. Over 70% of Sudanese women report sexual violence during conflict. Billions are spent on the generals' villas and weapons, while less than 1% on the budget reaches women's health and protection.
So the generals have billions that go to their villas. Okay, who gave Al-Burhan billions of dollars, I wonder, historically? In 2019, when Burhan and Hamedi cooed Omar Bashir, who gave them billions in aid and supplies? Who was it, I wonder? Oh, was it Saudi and the UAE? Was it Saudi and UAE that gave these two generals literally $6 billion in total? About $6 billion, which included weapons, which included aid, which included cash. But now, at least one of them, Al-Burhan, he is Hamas in Africa. He is abusing women. Yeah, he was abusing women when you were supporting him, when you were giving him billions of dollars. He was also abusing women and committing abuses against them. So
women are beaten for wearing jeans. Imprisoned for marrying a Christian.
A pregnant Christian woman in Sudan has been sentenced to death for apostasy. Miriam Abraham is the daughter of a Muslim father and Orthodox Christian mother. According to Christian Solidarity Worldwide, a court ruled Miriam...
I don't know why the video is mirrored. Like, hold on, let me try to mirror it back. Okay, there we go. Because if you're trying to read the Arabic, it's been mirrored. Here you go.
Left Islam when she married a Christian man. The judge gave her 4 days to recant her Christian faith and escape the death sentence, but Miriam refused. She says she's never been a Muslim.
Raped inside hospitals, and children are not spared from sexual violence.
Also violating the people, not just killing or hitting them, but also sexually violating them. Some of the children who went to this police station, they complain about attempts of sexual abuse, the boys and the girls, the boys especially.
So when a woman dares to speak, the Muslim Brotherhood everywhere rushes to silence her. And not with us. I'm from a nation that reached Mars. While they are...
Okay, so all of these human rights abuses, violating women, violating children, this is also being done by the RSF, which the UAE is funding and supporting. So even if we put aside their historical support for Hamedi and Burhan, even putting that aside, which the UAE has given them so much cash and weapons to perpetuate these atrocities, even putting aside that history, even today, the side that UAE supports, the RSF, are engaged in all of these atrocities. They're engaged in all of these violations, all of these, the rape and pillaging, the massacres, the silencing of women. The RSF is doing that just as much as anyone else, if not more. They're actually more brutal. So the sheer hypocrisy, the sheer propaganda, haspara, like it's just hard to believe they can be this brazen and blatant, like no shame at all. Okay, so now this is kind of the most disgusting part of the video.
And not with us. I'm from a nation that reached Mars.
I'm from a nation that reached Mars. Oh, really? When did the UAE reach Mars? Does the UAE have any kind of real space program actually? Or is the UAE just throwing money at the United States to give them a space program? They just bought a space program, a United States space program, and NASA program. And then so that they can claim, oh, we reached Mars because we send a robot to Mars. We reached Mars. No, you didn't reach Mars. All of the science and the technology came from the United States. You just dumped $1 million or billions of dollars to buy that technology, so you can slap, your flag on it and say, oh, we're from a nation that reached Mars. So now look at this chauvinism. The Africans didn't reach Mars, but we reached Mars.
While they are still busy destroying their own land and enslaving their own people.
We reached Mars. They are enslaving their own people. They're brutalizing their own people. So, again, referring to Africans, your nation is what is contributing to this. Your nation is what is funding the enslavement, the brutalization.
To those who curse and slander, this was your first lesson.
Oh, this was your first lesson. Oh, I'm shivering. Like, again, the public relations companies working with the UAE government and their Ministry of Propaganda or Media or whatever, they need to revisit the strategy of having a boss babe, like a tough e-girl, like talking tough and trying to be intimidating. That was your first lesson. We're gonna give you more lessons. Like, this is so off-putting. Like, even if someone had no idea, no clue about the conflict, about the UAE's involvement with the RSF and its contribution to the humanitarian crisis, if you had no idea, you'd be so turned off by this e-girl. I think her name is Rauda. This e-girl coming on, putting out this kind of racist rhetoric, like, we went to Mars. My nation, the UAE, the Emiratis, we went to Mars. And you're just still in the Stone Ages, enslaving each other. Like, you'd be turned off. And then this boss babe attitude, like, oh, that was your first lesson. Try it again. Why don't you try it? All you can do is hurl insults because you're Ikhwan and you're Hamas and you're Hezbollah. Like, this is just off-putting. Like, if you want to use women, here, I'll give free advice to the UAE public relations, their Ministry of Propaganda. You're not doing this right. If you want to use women, you have to portray women as crying. Women's tears are what is going to get that emotional reaction from simp men who are going to adopt whatever political position that you are trying to spread. So it's women's tears that evoke that kind of sympathy from the simps, from the men who biologically have this kind of visceral reaction to women crying. But if the woman is tough and she's trying to be bossy and she's like, oh, we're going to show you, that actually has the opposite reaction. That's going to turn people off from your message. Instead, you should have this idiot, this like prostitute. She needs to cry on camera. Oh, I was insulted. Oh, and I'm so sad. Why are these Hamas terrorists? Why are they insulting me? I'm just like the Sudanese women who are being pillaged and violated. Oh, like, that's the kind of crying message that is going to be more effective. What you're doing here with the boss babe, standing up, puffing out her chest, like, oh, try it again. Your first lesson, I'm going to show you. That's the exact opposite reaction is going to be generated from that.
We do not respond with filth. We respond with manners, facts, and dignity. Now try again. Speak without swearing. argue without degrading. Show the world you are a human.
Show the world that you are a human, yeah. The UAE, of all places, is the arbiter of who is human or not. So this is just shocking propaganda. Like, it's ineffective, because if this was posted on Twitter and she got ratioed immediately, it reached millions. Like, the view count of the video was in the millions, but she was getting ratioed by everyone, because everyone is so disgusted by what she's putting out, and everyone can see through the UAE propaganda. And now everyone associates the UAE with Israel. It's part of the Zionist force in the entire region. So no one's buying this kind of propaganda, and it's so, like, off-putting. It's not even effective propaganda. So she was getting ratioed. People are calling her all kinds of names, deservedly. I called her a prostitute, competing with Rabbi Ferris for the biggest prostitute of the UAE. And actually, the video was mass reported, and the visibility of it got limited, and she had to repost it. And she said, "Oh, Hamas, the Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood, has mass reported my video." So the Hamas at Twitter, the moderation team is Hamas, and they limited the reach of my video. So here, I reposted it. So the whole goal of the UAE, wider geopolitical goal, is to any type of civilian government. It doesn't even have to be a Muslim, Islamist government. It might have no connection to Islam at all, but just by virtue of it being civilian, and there being, like, elections, like actual legitimate elections in a country, that is a threat to the UAE. That threatens their model of rule, their monarchical rule. They view this as potentially leading to another Arab Spring-like situation. It threatens their power. So all of these Gulf countries, any type of civilian democratic rule, doesn't matter if it's Islamic or not, they're going to call it Ikhwan. They're going to say, this is Muslim Brotherhood, this is Ikhwani, this is terrorism, this is Hamas, and they're going to oppose it, and they're going to channel billions in resources to arm counter groups, to coup any type of civilian government, to coup any type of democratic process. And I'm not like a fan of democracy. I'm not like a proponent of liberal democracy. But this is, and that's the difference between me and Ikhwan, like ideologically. Ideologically, Ikhwan does concede a lot to liberalism, and they have deviant ideas when it comes to liberalism and accepting some of these values, like democratic elections, etc. But that being said, I can understand what UAE, what Saudi, and Israel, what they are trying to do, which is to eliminate any type of civilian rule, whether it's Islamist or not, and put in power military dictators that they can buy and that they can control for their purposes, for their interests. And ultimately, that's going to be the interest of Israel. That's going to be the interest of Israel, whether it's coming through the proxy of the UAE or Saudi or any of these Gulf countries. So that's why, even though I'm not Ikhwani, I don't accept the Muslim Brotherhood, I have ideological differences with the Muslim Brotherhood, I see at least the Muslim Brotherhood as on the right side. They're on the right side of opposing Zionism, of opposing greater Israel and the control of Zionists across the entire region. Whereas the UAE and the Gulf, they want to just be proxies for Zionism, for the United States. They just want to keep enriching themselves and entrenching their power as controlling the Middle East for their personal interests at the expense of the Muslim people, not only in the Gulf, but in the entire Ummah, in the entire Muslim world, including in Africa, including in Sudan. So this is why they should be opposed. Like, Muslims should oppose them, even though we're not Ikhwan, we're not Muslim Brotherhood, and we find problems with Ikhwan. They're not as bad. They're not as problematic. They're not as destructive as what the UAE is doing and what the UAE wants to do in collaboration with Israel. That's the way to understand like the broader trend, the broader dynamic that's happening within the Middle East in 2025. Okay, so that is Sudan. Anything else that I forgot to mention? Let me just look at my notes. I mean, those are the main points. And again, the UAE is involved. They are they're the primary country that is exacerbating the conflict, but none of these other Muslim countries are helping the situation either. Turkey, Iran, they're not helping the situation either. They're also providing arms. So what kind of... They also have blood on their hands. They're also contributing to these 13 million refugees. So UAE has a disproportionate amount of the blame, but other countries are not blameless in this conflict. And we don't have a situation where there's a powerful, centralized Muslim government who can act internationally and represent the interests of Muslims, who can actually intervene. Imagine if you had a khilafah. Imagine if you had a powerful Muslim government who could intervene and could come into Sudan, send soldiers to Sudan to be able to establish peace, to resolve the conflicts and mediate for the sake of Muslims. Even if Sudan isn't part of that Muslim government or part of the Khilafah, maybe Sudan remains independent. But at least this government, this caliphate, they could intervene. They could be able to project their power in order to create peace. For who? For the Muslims that are in Sudan. And that could be the case in any part of the world, in any region, whether it's the Rohingya in Myanmar, whether it's the Palestinians, whether it's the Syrians, whether it's the Indonesians, wherever Muslims are, the Bosnians, wherever Muslims are being massacred or there's civil unrest, then a centralized Muslim force can operate not on the basis of national interests, but on the basis of a shared deen, religion. We're part of the same ummah. We're brothers and sisters. We have to support each other. We are obligated by Allah to help and to support, to establish justice, to establish peace. Like that's what's missing in the current nation-state model, where all the Muslims have been divided up along ethnic, racial lines, sectarian lines. They've been divided up, and this has allowed a divide and conquer strategy. And deliberately, when the post-colonialism in the independence period in the 20th century, the colonial powers, the British, the French, later on the United States, they divided up countries in a deliberate way to put two ethnic and racial groups or religious groups, 2, 3, 4, in the same nation state, under the same nation state. That was a deliberate strategy. For example, the Sykes-Picot Agreement after World War I to cut up the Middle East. They deliberately put together Sunnis and Shia, Arabs and Kurds and Turks. They deliberately drew up the lines to include different ethnicities, different sects, different religions, sometimes Muslims and Christians, in order to create dysfunctional states that could not unify. They would be in perpetual civil strife, civil conflict, vying for power, fighting each other. That was deliberate, to keep all of these countries weak, fighting each other, as opposed to directing their energies to the West, to Israel, to these other powers. And that's their deliberate strategy, and it's worked. It's worked for them brilliantly. The solution is for Muslims to ally with each other, for Muslims to say, look, we are Muslims first and foremost. Let's look past ethnicity, sect, race. Let's look past that. National origin, let's look past that. The nations are just imaginary lines that have been drawn by people who hate us, people who have a long history of genociding us. Why should we care about these imaginary lines that have been drawn on the map? We should care about Allah, who has made us an ummah, who has made us a nation, the best nation. That's what we should care about. That's what we should unite on the basis of. That's what we should take as our foundation for working together. And until we do that, we're going to be constantly divided, weakened, genocided, made into refugees, suffering humanitarian crisis after humanitarian crisis, coup after coup after coup. This is a big problem. This is a big problem, and it needs a solution. The solution is political identity, where Muslims identify as Muslim first and foremost, and they want a khilafah. They want political sovereignty for Muslims to serve Muslim interests. That is what is the solution. At this point, unfortunately, it's depressing. Many Muslims don't have this kind of consciousness. They don't have this desire for a unified ummah. And yeah, there's a lot of lip service that you might find. There's a lot of lip service. Yeah, oh, brother, yeah, we're all Muslim. Oh, it's so beautiful. We're so diverse. All these things. Yeah, there's a lot of lip service. But when push comes to shove, when you have to put your money where your mouth is, we revert back to racism, dividing on the basis of ethnic lines, nationalism, this kind of sick nationalism. Moroccans versus Algerians, Egyptians versus Sudanese versus Somalis, Yemenis versus Saudis versus Emiratis, versus Iranians versus Syrians versus Kurds versus Turks versus South Asians versus Afghanis, Afghanistan versus Pakistan, Pakistan versus Bangladesh, Indonesia versus Malaysia. On and on and on. These conflicts. And this is going to perpetuate. It is the internal weakness. It is our internal ability to join forces that allows these external powers to prey on us, to feed on us, to take advantage of our internal weakness by turning us against each other. It's this meme of fell for it again. We keep falling for it. And I've experienced this very acutely in the past 2 years, because I've dedicated my attention to countering Zionism, countering the Israeli genocide of the Palestinians. And I've pointed out that yes, we have to point at Zionists and the Greater Israel Project and Netanyahu and Judaism, the religious teachings of Judaism and international Jewish power. Like, we have to pay attention to that. We have to counter that. But let's look at the internal problems as well, because these Zionists are using our internal weakness and our division and sectarianism against us as a weapon, as a tool. We have to address this internal problem. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to withstand this kind of external attack against our religion. That's been my message since October 7th. And you've seen the way that I've been treated. You've seen the attacks that I've been subjected to. My family has been attacked. Any of my friends and affiliates online have been attacked by Wahhabis, for example, by sectarians, by these Arab supremacists. So this is that it shows you that really this is extremely sensitive. Our enemies do not want us to unite. Our enemies do not want us to work together. And if someone comes on an English-speaking dawah and has standing over the target and saying, look, this is the issue, this divisiveness, sectarianism, this is what has to be addressed, there is a massive campaign, well-funded campaign, to discredit that person, to smear that person, to bad jacket that person. That's what they've been doing with me. Trying to cancel me. So, yeah, this is all connected and all related. Okay, so that's Sudan. We spent an hour speaking about Sudan. Now we're going to go to the Rohingya. But let's take a break to look at the super chats. Because if you have super chats related to Sudan, might as well read them and address them now. Okay, I'll read the ones that are most directly relevant. Muslim Hashira says, Jazakallah khair for the time you spend to educate us, brother. May Allah increase your knowledge and wisdom. Ameen. Thank you for your super chat. Son of Andalus says, humanitarian aid is the foot in the door that Western nations use to make us change our way of life and religion. Many times these same nations cause the crisis they're trying to fix. Absolutely correct. Okay. These other two super chats are not related, so I'll read them at the end of the episode. Okay, back to the program. So now let's talk about the Rohingya and the situation in Myanmar. Now, the situation there, I'll also talk about the history, and again, we'll see a lot of similarities. And there are some certain differences as well, because in Myanmar, the genocide is not happening at the hands of Muslims. The genocide is happening at the hands of Buddhists. These Burmese Buddhists, which are ethnically and religiously distinct from the Rohingya Muslims. And this is also coups involved that are exacerbating the situation. So let me bring up a map so again we can orient ourselves and understand like what is actually going on. And again, we're going to see a lot of similarities here. Okay, so to understand the situation with the Rohingya, we have to understand a little bit about Myanmar, which is formerly known as Burma. And this is where it is on the map. Okay, so you see on the Bay of Bengal, near the Indian Ocean, here is Myanmar. And where are the Rohingya? The Rohingya are on this western side, on the coast. This is the Rakhine province. You can't see my cursor. Shoot. Okay, well, maybe I can make this marked here. Okay. So this area, this is the Rakhine province. And this is a very contested area because it's very geostrategically significant for reasons that I will explain. But the Rohingya are primarily from this area in Myanmar. And they, in 2017, 8 years ago, you had the military junta within the Myanmar central government who began to attack the Rohingya. Why did they do this? Well, there was a pretext for this, for why they attacked. And there is the Rohingya have there's a group of the Rohingya Muslims that they have a kind of resistance force, like a rebel force, who are advocating for rights. They are advocating for the rights in Myanmar because the Rohingya are a disenfranchised and oppressed group. They have been for most of Myanmar's history since Myanmar achieved independence in 1948. So the Rohingya have always been treated as a fifth column. They are the poorest ethnicity. And the way to understand how the legal system in Myanmar treats the Rohingya, you have to understand the 1982 citizenship law. The citizenship law identifies 152 ethnicities that are officially part of Myanmar, and the Rohingya were deliberately excluded from that. So that means the Rohingya were denied citizenship. They could not be considered equal citizens within Myanmar, and so they've been treated as basically refugees in their own country, even though they've been in the Rakhine area for generations. But the ethnic and religious majority, the Buddhist Burmese, have been treating them as this fifth column within the country, and they don't have citizenship, they can't vote, they have no political power, they have no political agency. So there was a paramilitary force, resistance force that the Rohingya formed, called the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, the ARSA, I guess I'll call it. And the ARSA was attacking some police stations in 2017. And that served as a pretext for a massive crackdown that resulted in genocide, massacres, genocide, forced migration, and 700,000 of the Rohingya were pushed out of the Rakhine province to the northwest into Bangladesh. So if you go Cox's Bazar here, this is where the refugee camps of the Rohingya are, close to the border. And that's where they've been for the past 8 years. And the Rohingya are in the news now these days because there's been, this is the 8-year anniversary of this forced migration and genocide. And also now there's humanitarian aid is running out. The transitional government of Bangladesh is having a hard time supporting these refugees. So the amount of money that they can give the refugees, the supplies that they can give to the refugees are slowly diminishing and running out. So this is causing a crisis. And then you have within Myanmar itself renewed hostility towards the Rohingya that remain. And there's renewed clashes. And this time it's not the military junta that is the cause of the conflict. It's another party, the Arakan army. The Arakan army is also the Burmese Buddhist ethnicity. They're not Muslim, they're not Rohingya, but they're also part of the Rakhine province. They're also part of this area. And they want independence from the military junta of Myanmar. So let's get into more of the background of what happened. So obviously 2017, you have this attack and ethnic cleansing campaign against the Rohingya. It was on the basis of an attack against the Rohingya attacking some police outposts. Some have speculated that this was a false flag because the military junta and the centralized military forces in Myanmar, they had a planned attack against the Rohingya. They were planning in advance to attack the Rohingya and to massacre them and to force them out. That was already planned. So then people speculate that maybe the ARSA attacks on the police outposts, this was just a false flag to justify a crackdown on the Rohingya. Some speculate this, others say the official story is no, the ARSA was just defending itself. What's interesting is the ARSA is not tied to any kind of jihadist group. They're not tied to ISIS. They're not tied to any kind of international, quote unquote, international jihad. They have some connections to some Saudi trained preachers, but it's not like a international jihadi organization. They purely are trying to defend the Rohingya using arms. They say this is a defensive jihad. We don't have citizenship. We're being oppressed, so we're defending ourselves. This is what they claim. I'm not defending the ARSA because many Rohingya actually criticize the ARSA. They say the ARSA is actually forcing Rohingya men to join their force and to fight. And so Rohingya themselves are divided on the legitimacy and whether the ARSA is a force of good or not. So there's internal divisions there. So this is because of this renewed attention crisis situation that's unfolding in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. Now there's increased international attention on the Rohingya. So what is actually happening when it comes to the history of Burma that is exacerbating this? Well, in 2017 you had the massacres, but then in 2021 there was a coup. There was a coup. So again, Myanmar is split. This is back in 2021. You had a split between the civilian government and then the military complex. The military complex felt that they were losing control. You had these democratic institutions that were gaining power. And this was led by this Nobel Prize winning Burmese woman, Aung San Suu Kyi, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She won the Nobel Prize in 1991. And she's leading a kind of civilian democratic process that ostensibly is supposed to be diverse, like representing the nation of Myanmar. But people don't like that. People don't like a kind of unity civilian government. And the military was using racism against the Rohingya to rally support, to rally populist support to entrench their power. And then they did a coup. They did a coup in 2021. And Aung San Suu Kyi was put in prison as a Nobel Prize winner. And people weren't really too upset about that. They weren't too pressed about that. Why? Because when the 2017 massacres were happening by the same military junta, Aung San Suu Kyi didn't say jack. She didn't say anything to defend the Rohingya or to criticize the military. And this brought a lot of international criticism. People said, you're a Nobel Prize winner for peace, and you are supposed to represent a kind of liberal democratic spirit for a democratic liberal Myanmar of not an ethno-state, not a kind of Myanmar ethno-state of extreme populist extremists, right-wing extremists, but you're staying silent on the genocide of the Rohingya. So Aung San got a lot of international criticism for this. And people were speculating that she really had no choice. The Aung San simps are saying she didn't have a choice. Aung San Suu Kyi simps were saying she didn't have a choice. Why? Because the military was going to coup her. And she was going to lose power. She was going to be put in prison. So she had to stay silent. That's what eventually happened. That's exactly what happened in 2021. She's in prison now. The military couped and they took over. And she's in prison. So Myanmar, similar to Sudan that we saw, is a country that is plagued by civil strife. It's been happening since 2021. And there are between 60 and 200 different factions that are all fighting. And they fall along two basic lines. There's the pro-military group who are the populist, ethno-nationalists. They support the military. And then on the other side, you have mainly the National Unity Government, the NUG. And they're actually pro-Rohingya. They're pro-Rohingya. They're pro-diversity, pro-democracy. And maybe they're doing that just to get international support against the military junta. In Tatmadaw is what the military junta is called. Tatmadaw. So those are the two main factions. And then there's like different ethnic groups. There are Christian groups that form their own paramilitary organizations. They're militants and they're fighting. It's like, and in certain parts, it's like, it's not just guerrilla warfare, it's conventional warfare. So the Myanmar is also one of these failed states, and it's because of military coups. And this is not something that just affects Muslims. These are Buddhists. In this case, it's just that the Muslims are once again the victims of this. So what else? Why is Rakhine province here so important? There's a lot of significance to the Rakhine province. Number one, it's resource rich. And number two, it's on the coast of the Bay of Bengal. And that's significant. Why? Because this is what China needs. China is very concerned about having access to the Indian Ocean, and they need a land access. So China is accessing the Indian Ocean through this land bridge through Myanmar, through the Rakhine province, to this deep sea port located at Chukpu. I think it's pronounced Chukpu. Chukpu is a deep sea port, and deep sea ports, if you don't know, they're very significant because that gives you access to international trade. It also can serve your energy needs. If your country needs oil imports, gas imports, it's usually coming through these tankers, these massive super tankers that are bringing millions of barrels of oil and gas to your country. That, in order to be able to reach your country, they need to be able to dock at a deep sea port. And there's a difference between a normal port and a deep sea port. What's the difference there? The deep sea port has to have a depth in terms of the seabed of anywhere from 10 meters to 30 meters deep. You have to have that depth because these are massive cargo ships, tanker ships that need to be able to come to your port to unload without hitting the ground, without hitting the seabed. But naturally, like the coast isn't that deep. Like where the land meets the water, it's usually like a gradient like this, right? It's a gradient. So that prevents the ships, these tanker ships, from actually reaching the land because they'll drag along the coast. They'll drag along the seabed that is only a meter deep, 2 meters deep, even 5 meters deep. So naturally they won't be able to, because of the natural gradient, they won't be able to reach the land. You have to have a deep sea port, and that requires engineering. It requires coastal civil engineering. It's a massive project to be able to dredge the seabed, to remove the excess sand, for example, and dirt, to remove it in order to create that 10 to 30 meter depth, to create the deep sea port, because they don't naturally occur. The estimate that I read is that about 70% of deep sea ports are man-made. Only 30% are naturally occurring because there's like a continental shelf and there's a drop. Like where the land meets the water, there's just a drop, and then that's naturally a deep sea port. Those naturally occur mainly in the North Atlantic. But 70% of the world's deep sea ports are not natural, they have to be man-made. Anyway, I thought that was interesting to get to understand a lot of geopolitics, because if you remember, when it comes to the port of SUDAN is one of the few deep sea ports. Because people might wonder, like if we go back to the map of SUDAN, people might have this question. It's a very important question to address. Like, well, you have the Red Sea is huge, and you have all of this coastline, right? It's like all of this coastline. So why is like one port so significant? Like, why can't you have another port here? Like, just bring your oil tankers and your cargo ships and dock them like at any point. Like, just build a port anywhere you want, and you can unload your goods. You can import, export. Why not? But the reason why is it's a massive engineering project to build a deep sea port. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to actually do that, and many countries don't have those resources. Is usually other countries that control it. You can't just set up a port wherever you want. And it requires technology and machinery that even if you have money to build like a railroad station to the port, to build like the cranes that are needed to empty the cargo ships. Like you have that technology, but there's another level, another tier of technology and wealth that you need to actually dredge up the seabed. And that prevents a barrier to entry to having deep sea ports. This is why they become very strategically significant. Having the deep sea port and having control of the straits, as we'll see, that also, just like it factors with the whole Sudan conflict and the Red Sea conflict with the Bab el-Mandeb here, connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and the rest of the Indian Ocean, the same issue, literally the same issue, is exacerbating the situation in Myanmar. How so? Let's go to that. Okay, so China wants to have access to the Indian Ocean. Why? Obviously, to access everything west. China needs to be able to access the Indian Ocean, to access the Red Sea, to access the Persian Gulf, because 80% of oil imports of China come from this side of the world, from the Indian Ocean side. And how can you get from the Indian Ocean to China? Well, there's this huge land barrier that means that China can't directly access the Indian Ocean. They have to access it through this strait, the Strait of Malacca. Another very small, in the narrowest part, it's only 3 kilometers wide. This strait here between Indonesia and Malaysia. See, the Malacca Strait. So imagine all of China, not all, but a massive percentage of its energy, oil needs, economic needs in terms of imports and exports, a massive amount of that, a huge percentage, depends on access to this strait, the Malacca Strait. This creates a dilemma, and the Chinese call it the Malacca Dilemma. Because if the United States goes to war with China, the first thing that the US is going to do is to close this strait. To close the Strait of Malacca, to economically cripple the Chinese. So the Chinese are very invested in finding an alternative. And that's what a lot of the Belt and Road Initiative is about, is providing land routes through Asia and building infrastructure, railroad infrastructure, and deep seaport infrastructure to bypass this strait. And it's significant, actually, that, look, these major ports, or these straits, rather, whether it's the Bab el-Mandeb or the Strait of Hormuz, actually, in the Persian Gulf, or the Strait of Malacca, Muslims are the ones who are controlling this. Muslims have control, ostensibly, seemingly, the Muslims have control of all of these critical choke points that are vital for the global economy. The Suez Canal, another one. It's Muslims that are the countries that ostensibly should be able to control, because it's on paper, they're the countries that have the sovereignty of the countries that are surrounding these important geopolitical locations. But as we know, it's just on paper. It's just on paper, and all of these countries have to bend the knee to the more powerful forces. That's the unfortunate reality. Okay, so going back to Myanmar, you have the Chakpyu deep sea port, and that's what China really relies on. And so they've created a land bridge through Myanmar, and the military junta is, taking advantage of that situation because they need the support of China to remain in power, whereas the opposition parties like the NUG, they rely mainly on Western support. And so the Rakhine province, not only because of its resources, but also because of its access to the sea, this is very critical geopolitically. So that's what's causing the fighting for control. And you have the Arakans, who are Burmese. You have the what I keep forgetting. Tatmadaw. Tatmadaw is the military junta, the military government. They are fighting the Arakan army, the AA, and now the ARSA, the Rohingya forces, are actually allied with the Tatmadaw. So the Tatmadaw are working with the Rohingya in certain capacities against the Arakan who want control of the Rakhine province. So, and the whole goal, what happens to the Rohingya is that they get divided. It's a divide and conquer strategy. Keep them split. One group is allied with the Arakan, another group is allied with the Tatmadaw, both of which are Burmese, Buddhists. And the Muslims remain divided. The Muslims remain the victims. So this is the Rohingya background, the history, and the current state of the refugee crisis. So now you have people in Bangladesh, Muslims in Bangladesh, who are advocating for the Rohingya. They're holding protests. They're going to have a conference. The Bangladesh government is going to have a conference on the Rohingya issue because it's a worsening humanitarian crisis. Bangladesh barely has resources for its own population, especially in this transitional period ever since Sheikh Hasina has been deposed. And now the Rohingya, which are in the country in the southeast, they are being squeezed. They're being pressured because there's fewer resources, there's less money, there's less aid coming in, and there are renewed attacks. So they're increasing. Refugees are now coming in again because of conflicts that are broiling in the Rakhine province in Myanmar. So that's the situation. And what the Bangladesh government has tried to do is get China to intervene. Bangladesh has leverage that it can exercise with China. Bangladesh can become a client of China. They can give China access to the Bay of Bengal. So this is, actually, no, they can't because India is land blockading them. But still, Bangladesh becomes a geostrategic partner for China to counter India in the region. And that's something to China's advantage. So Bangladesh has been trying to leverage that to ease the humanitarian situation, but China has not been able to just side with Bangladesh. Why? Because they also need the Burmese Tatmadaw, the military. They still need to be on their side so that they have access to the Bay of Bengal and the deep sea port. So that's why it's been limited. That is, let me check my notes. Yeah, so they've been having protests. March for Rohingya happened yesterday. And there's a video that I can share with you. Just give me a second. From the protest. Let me just get the sound. 1 second. So this is a protest that happened yesterday.
From the mountain to the sea. Arakan will be free. From the river to the sea. From the mountain to the sea. Arakan will be free. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Nare takbir. Nare takbir. Allahu Akbar. বিশ্ব মুসলিম ঐক্য করো। আরাকান স্বাধীন করো। আরাকান স্বাধীন করো। বিশ্ব মুসলিম ঐক্য করো। বিশ্ব মুসলিম ঐক্য করো। আরাকান স্বাধীন করো। দুনিয়ার মাজলুম এক হও লড়াই করো। এক হও লড়াই করো। দুনিয়ার মাজলুম। দুনিয়ার মাজলুম এক হও লড়াই করো। এক হও লড়াই করো। দুনিয়ার মাজলুম।
Maybe someone in the chat can translate what they're chanting, but you can see that they're marching for the Rohingya. They're protesting the violence from the Arakan army against the Rohingya. But I mean, this creates a dilemma for Bangladesh, because if they invite Western agencies to come and provide humanitarian aid to the Rohingya, that's going to cause entrance, like a foot in the door for liberals to push their liberal agenda within Bangladesh. And a lot of the Muslims in Bangladesh, they know that that's a bad route. They know what that leads to, and they don't want it. They don't want Western influence. They don't want UN to have a foot in the country. So they are opposed to that, but they also want aid and relief for the Rohingya in this worsening humanitarian situation. So the Bangladeshis are between a rock and a hard place. So that's my overview of the situation. I'm going to continue to monitor and cover any developments, but let me know if I missed anything. Let me know what you think of what I covered. Obviously, there's a lot of details I can't cover. It'd just be too long. But hopefully now you have a better understanding of the geopolitics, the history, like what's creating these two humanitarian crises affecting Muslims in Sudan and in for the Rohingya in Bangladesh and Myanmar. Okay, so I'll look at your super chats. I'll also look at the regular chat. You can let me know if I missed anything. If you want to prioritize your comment, then leave a super chat and I can read it. Let me go to the super chat screen. This was given earlier. Saeed says, Salam Daniel, last stream you mentioned YouTube/X censorship, so I invited you to Nostr as an alternative since nobody owns it. Not an ad, just think it's a great platform for Muslims which can never be taken away from us. I'll check it out, but I don't know why you think it can't ever be taken away. Like internet service providers can block any website, so any website, any social media platform that relies on the internet can be taken down. That's the sad reality. But yeah, Muslims need to have their own. It's not just having your own website or your own app or your own payment processor. Even like you have to have your own infrastructure to actually be able to prevent being shut down. And to have your own infrastructure, you have to have your own political sovereignty, your own government. You have to have your own ability to defend that government from attack. And fortunately, Muslims really don't have much of that. And maybe Iran, you could say, maybe Turkey to a certain extent, but Turkey is NATO aligned, so how much independence do they really have? Is there an independent Muslim nation? I don't really see that. This is why we need Khilafah. If you want an actual social media platform or internet where Muslims can't be banned from, you need to, a prerequisite of that is Khilafah. Aegon Art says, Salam Daniel, I'm Aegon from Kosovo. Watch someday Tariq El-Gohari that prayed with a rabbi and a pastor hand by hand made some outrage here in an interview about New Year and Sheikh Al-Albani. Salam to all. Tariq El-Gohari. Okay, he's praying with a rabbi and pastor hand in hand. I guess that's to be expected from this person, but I'll check it out. Okay, now I'm going to go to your regular comments in the chat. Muslim Boogeyman, good to see you. W Khilafa. Muslim Sayan, good to see you, bro. Any comments on Sudan or the Rohingya? What did you think of the analysis? Did you know this stuff already, or was it new information? Who is the target group for the e-girl propaganda video? It's the Western audience. Like, it's Westerners, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. That's the target. It's in English. Like, she's Emirati. She's probably like related to somehow to the royal family. I don't know actually for sure, but her name is Rauda something, and she was like on a go-kart team. She's like racing go-karts as like the national go-karting team. I never heard of international go-karting. I never heard of that. Go-karts are like tiny cars, tiny like mini cars with a small little engine that is for children. And she's like on the national team racing them. And somehow that gives her, that's her claim to fame. And she is running propaganda for the UAE government. So it's very bizarre. Like with the UAE, like they find people in the randomest places, like Rabbi Ferris, literally a CrossFit coach. Like he's just doing CrossFit. He has a gym. Like that's his whole life. And then suddenly he becomes a sheikh, teaching Islam, giving the khutbah at the masjid. It's just bizarre. I knew something about Aung San Suu Kyi, but not about China's machinations in the back. Yeah, Aung San Suu Kyi is interesting. She won the Nobel Prize in 1991 because she was opposed to these military dictatorships that were plaguing Myanmar. And she was portrayed as this kind of Gandhi-like figure, peaceful protesting, and she was put in prison, or like Nelson Mandela type figure. But she's actually the daughter of Aung San. Aung San is one of the main revolutionary leaders, who was fighting to achieve independence from the British. And he was assassinated by an opposition group 6 months before Burma was able to get independence from the British in 1948, I believe. So Aung San Suu Kyi is the daughter of Aung San, and yeah, they're Burmese. They're the Bamar race ethnicity, and they're Theravada Buddhists. That particular branch of Buddhism. And Buddhism, if you've watched Genius of Islam episode 3, you know that Buddhism, claiming to be so peaceful, it's a peaceful, non-violent religion, But Buddhists tend to be ethno-nationalists, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in China, whether it's in Myanmar, whether it's in Thailand. They tend to be ethno-nationalists, allying together on the basis of ethnicity, whether it's the Japanese ethnicity or the Burman ethnicity. And they often become very violent populists that attack ethnic minorities and religious minorities, whether it's Muslim or Christian, what have you. So Southeast Asia is going to become increasingly important. It's going to be an arena of increased conflict and war, because China continues to gain power. China is, very powerful already, but they're going to become even more powerful and challenge the supremacy of the United States in the global economy in terms of control, like military control over the world's resources, surrounding the Indian Ocean, surrounding Africa, within Africa, and Southeast Asia. And you can see already geostrategically the choke points that are going to be very critical when it comes to the waterways, like the Strait of Malacca. Muslims are in those regions. So if trends continue, it's potential that a lot more strife is going to come to Muslims, specifically in Southeast Asia. The Indonesians, the Malaysians, Muslims. There are some Muslims in Philippines, for example. So yeah, as the U.S.-China rivalry ramps up and becomes increasingly aggressive, increasingly more militant, then Muslims once again are going to be caught in the crossfire. And that this will include the Muslims not only in Southeast Asia, like in Malaysia and Indonesia, or Singapore or Brunei, but also the Muslims in the subcontinent, Bangladesh, Muslims in India, obviously, Muslims in Pakistan. Afghanistan is already involved as well, because China is just trying to create relations with all of these Muslim countries for its Belt and Road Initiative, for its economic purposes and ultimate control. So, and the Uyghurs, obviously, the Uyghurs in East Turkmenistan, in the eastern province of Xinjiang, are also, you can see they're in the crossfire of China's geopolitical goals. Let's see, anything else? China has blood of Uyghurs on their hands. There were something like 12 million of them in China. Is it 12 million or 20 million? I think their population of Uyghurs might be closer to 20 million. Maybe I'm misremembering. Buddhists equal violent vegetarians, says Muslim Boogeyman. That's what Muhammad Hijab said, right, about the Hindus. Why don't Muslim countries do anything about China's genocide of Muslim Uyghur people? Yeah, I mean, the Uyghur, the Rohingya, the Sudanese in Darfur, Palestinians, the Syrians, the Kurds, all of these are genocides, ethnic cleansings, massacres, mass death, displacement. What Muslim country is doing anything about any of these? So what we have to ask ourselves, what is causing this problem? What is the source of this perpetual impotence that we can't save ourselves? We can't fight for ourselves. We're just perpetual victims. That's the entire point of this show today. Fandom 5661 with the perpetual optimism. The Ummah is going through a reawakening through the Palestinian genocide. Inshallah, Muslims will regain control over their countries in the name of Allah and Prophet and protect the interest of the Ummah. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're optimistic, bro, but what is this reawakening? You know, again, like when the rubber meets the road, when you actually have to put your money where your mouth is and cross ethnic lines, national lines, then suddenly the reawakening is put on hold. Suddenly, you know, the Ummah is not so important if it means crossing ethnic or sectarian or racial lines. A lot of good talk, but when it actually matters, like such a simple thing, like, okay, we need to back, if a Muslim country is getting attacked, we have to back them. When Palestinians are getting attacked, we have to support them. There's a genocide taking place. When Iran is getting bombed, for example, we need to support when the Sudanese, when the Rohingya, like we should care. What you see is a apathy. What you see is excuses. No, they're grave worshippers. No, they don't have the right aqidah. Aqidah is the most important thing. No, they don't have the exact same sect as I do, so therefore they're not Muslim. That's what we see, right? Am I the only one who experiences this online? And online is a perfect reflection of reality. Like the same dynamic exists in the masajid. Like the same exact dynamic exists in the masajid. You think you go to one of these super masjids that they're constantly fundraising for? Like, aren't you sick and tired of these YouTube ads where it's like, oh, we're building a masjid, we need your support. And they bring like some kind of pseudo celebrity to fundraise for the latest masjid in this country or this place, this, you know, European country or whatever. And they're raising millions of dollars. Like, are these masjids, like, what role do these masajid play for the global ummah? Like, you're drawing all this money from the global ummah. You're advertising globally to fundraise for your masjid to build I don't know what. And is that masjid going to be a platform for advocating for the interests of the ummah? No. No chance. By the way, I've never heard of one of these masjids actually getting built and having any kinds of presence. You have enough funding, ad funding to fundraise. You putting these ads cost money on YouTube. You're putting ad money on YouTube to fundraise for your masjid. But then when the masjid is built, we don't hear. The ummah doesn't hear about your masjid and what it's been doing. Like, what has it been contributing? You know, yeah, you need a masjid, you need a place to pray. But having a place to pray doesn't require an international ad campaign to get money. So you want to build a masjid, it doesn't require an international ad campaign. And depending on what country you are, some of these Muslim countries have many masajid. Many masajid. The city that I'm in, Texas, look at the state of Texas. There are hundreds of masajid in Texas. In my city, you have over 100 masajid. Over 100 in a western city, Texas. That's how many Muslims there are. It's not difficult to open up a masjid or a musalla. It doesn't require millions of dollars. If you're requiring millions and millions of dollars, then this has to be more than a masjid. Those kinds of resources that you have been able to gather, it has to be more than just a masjid. What is this contributing to dawah, toward the interests of the Muslims? Because for better or worse, the masajid, especially in the West, become a hub of religious authority because religion is not state-run in the West. In other countries, you have a religious ministry. The government, the central government, is controlling all religious activities and all the religious authorities, the imams, the khatibs in that country. But in the West, it's the masajid, and it's decentralized, especially in the United States. So you have these masajid they become the source of religious instruction, the source of religious authority for the Muslims in the West, which number in the millions. And what are they contributing towards an awareness of these problems that the Ummah faces? What are they contributing to da'wah? And I'm not saying they're contributing nothing. I'm not saying that they contribute nothing, but is it proportional to the amount of resources that they're sucking up? The millions of dollars that they suck up to build the next building? It's very frustrating and aggravating that you are constantly begging the community, the Muslims, to pay money, sadaqah, that they could be contributing to any other cause, fi sabilillah, or for the poor, the actual needy. And that sadaqah is going into your pockets, and you're building a very nice building. Oh, it's beautiful, wonderful. No complaints there. But there's actually no vision to address the big problems that the Ummah faces. To actually, you're fundraising internationally, but you're not actually contributing internationally to what Muslims internationally need. This should be seen as a you are misappropriating the funds of the Ummah. There's no accountability. I told you, like, you go to any of these masajid, many of them have explicitly prohibited talking about Zionism. You can't actually go into one of these masajid, and it's not because it's government controlled. It's not like the U.S. government is preventing masajid to talk about Israel. You can talk about any subject that you want in the masjid, as far as the U.S. government is concerned, as long as you're not advocating for violence or whatever. So it's pretty free, in terms of religious freedom in the masajid, but it's like a self-imposed restriction that you can't talk about politics. You can't talk about Zionism. The only politics that you can talk about in the masajid, in Texas at least, and many of these major U.S. cities where you have multi-million-dollar masajid, you can talk about politics like, oh, go vote for, in the election, for whatever, city council, or for the congressman, or for the president. Like, be a good voter, voting for the Democrats, the liberals. That's the only politics that are allowed. But if you want to talk about Zionism, Greater Israel, you want to talk about the Rohingya and the Burmese, the Sudanese, if you want to talk about any of that, no, that's, you might offend someone. You might someone might not like it. Maybe there's a board member of the masjid who won't approve of that, so it's strictly banned. You can't talk about that. You can't talk about any women's issues. You can't tell women to, stop being women. Stop being like these parasites. You can't tell women to wear their hijab, to be modest, to be good wives. You can't say that on the mimbar in these masajid in the United States. Pretty sad, huh? And maybe we can get into another episode talking about the structure of American masajid and how they've been designed, like the major masjid networks have been designed so that they can be controlled. Because even though the central government in the U.S. doesn't directly control the masajid, there are other tentacles of control. There's other means of control that they use. So that's something that maybe you can talk about one day. Okay, so I want to do a show on the Syrian situation. There are a lot of updates on Syria. There's also a lot of updates on what Israel is doing in Palestine. There was a hospital strike yesterday that garnered international outrage. So that's something interesting to cover. 4 Western journalists were killed in a strike on a hospital in Khan Yunis. And some of these journalists were associated with Western companies. And Israel took them out with a strike. Why? Because they were covering the famine in Gaza, the war crimes and the famine in Gaza. They're documenting it. They're broadcasting it. So what does Israel do? They takes them out with a strike in a hospital. And then when the aid workers and the rescue workers came to find the survivors and dig them out of the rubble, Israel struck again in a double tap strike, what's called a double tap, which is Israeli policy. You strike a target and then you wait 5 minutes until the rescue workers come, and then you strike it again to make sure everyone is dead. And it's a war crime, obviously. Bombing a hospital is a war crime. So it's like multiple levels of criminality and satanic lack of regard for humanity that Israel is engaged in. So inshallah, we can cover that. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Maybe we'll have a live stream tomorrow on that. And then Syria. Like with the Syrian situation, Syria is on the brink of a security agreement with who? Security agreement maybe with a Muslim country. You know, maybe Syria is realizing that it needs to smarten up and work with other Muslim countries to protect its interests. Is that the kind of security agreement that Jolani is agreeing to? Nope. It's security agreement with Israel. It's security agreement with Netanyahu. The Blessed Revolution. You have the Blessed Revolution has led to what? It's led to a complete Zionist occupation of Syria now. And this is, you know, exactly, I mean, I did not think it would be this bad. Like, even I did not think that the situation in Syria would be this bad. It's even worse than I anticipated. So all of the people who were criticizing me and attacking me and saying I'm an Iranian agent, a Madkhali, because I'm not bowing down to Jolani and singing the praises of the revolutionaries because, oh my God, I'm a, you know, Wahhabi in Idlib and I prayed Fajr in the masjid and Jolani was there. Therefore, Jolani is the next Khilafah, the next caliphate. And first Damascus and then Jerusalem. And now look at the situation. Now look at the cesspool that Syria is becoming. Like, it's terrible. It's a disaster. And it's just getting started, because once Syria is fully under the boot of the Zionist occupation, that's just the beginning. Then the same kind of ethnic cleansing, pushing Arabs out to make way for Israeli settlers, that's the next phase. That's the next phase. And who's going to suffer? It's the Syrians. It's the Syrians that are going to be the victims of that. And these are Muslims. These are Muslims who don't deserve to be ethnically cleansed by Zionists. But unfortunately, because of the leaders that we have, and the leaders that many of you support, you know, that's the ugly truth. Many of you were supporting Jolani. When someone like Daniel comes and says, hold up, guys, maybe we shouldn't be gung-ho singing the praises of Jolani. Who is this guy even? Who is he? And why are all the Israeli outlets, the Israeli-controlled media outlets, praising him and whitewashing his history, his background? Maybe we should pause. Maybe we should wait and see who he actually is, what he's actually going to do. Maybe we should have a little bit of skepticism, a little bit of hesitation before we sign on to the cult of personality that is Jolani. When I said that, what did all of these Madkhali, Wahhabi, Salafi, Syrian, Arab supremacists, ethno-nationalists, what did they say? They said Daniel is an agent. Now look at the situation. Now look at everything that I said, and worse has come true, has come to fruition. And all of the indications were there, and that's why I said very clearly, like, I'm happy that Assad is gone, but we have no idea whether the coming situation is going to be better. Potentially, in all likelihood, it's going to be worse. The situation in Syria is going to get worse. And there's no indication that Jolani is our guy, that Jolani is going to really represent Sunni Muslim interests, let alone the interests of Palestinians. And that's why I said very clearly the record is there. And you can see all of the Wahhabis and the Arab supremacists, these retards chimping out in the comments. You can see it. You can go back and see the videos on the channel. Now they're all quiet. Now they're all quiet. Now they don't want to talk about Jolani anymore. They don't want to talk about Ahmed Shara and the Blessed Revolution. No more live streams, guys. No more live streams with compassionate imams like Yasser Qadi, Omar Suleiman, Dili Hussein coming together. Oh, the Blessed Revolution. The thinking Muslim coming together to celebrate. Suddenly, they're all quiet. Wow, I wonder why. I wonder why. They were there to engagement farm. They were there to engagement farm and to shovel to you a bunch of slop, lies, and half-truths because that was profitable for them. That got the engagement on YouTube and X by telling you what you wanted to hear, by giving you the slop that you wanted to eat. This kind of unjustified optimism. They're there to feed you the optimism and to take your attention, your engagement, your money. They're happy to do that. But then when things actually turn out to be the exact opposite, and all of that optimism was not justified, they're nowhere to be found. They're nowhere to be found to have a little bit of shame, a little bit of contrition, a little bit of accountability. Like, guys, I was wrong. I said that this was going to happen. The exact opposite took place. I was wrong. I misled you. You have to have at least the dignity and the self-respect, let alone respect for your Muslim audience, to come clean and say, look, guys, I made a mistake. When it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to these issues, I'm actually an idiot. I have no clue. I shouldn't be talking. I just took advantage of a situation to engagement farm. But I actually had no clue, and so I should have shut my mouth. And when someone like Daniel was saying things that I disagreed with, I should have deferred to Daniel, because Daniel has a track record. He knows what he's talking about. That's what should have happened. But no, you have to have a Blessed Revolution party, a celebration, engagement farm. Feed your audience, a trusting audience, this slop, this optimism that has no basis in reality, where everyone should be skeptical. Everyone should be skeptical because all of the red flags were there. All of the signs were there. And I said, let's wait, guys, and see. This doesn't look good. And in all likelihood, this is going to fail because of what they're already setting up. Back in November and December of last year, what they're setting up looks like what they're going to do is make Syria into Jordan 2.0. And Jolani is complicit in that. That's what I said. And I was attacked by it. And then you had Goon Squad celebrating to counter signal me that, no, Daniel, actually, it's going to be first Damascus and then Jerusalem. And the Palestinians are going to be freed because Jolani is the next Khalifa. No. This is a hilarious comment. Daniel, you still mad? Iranians got kicked out. Get over it. It's been 8 months. Yeah, I am sad. But Syrians are the ones who are suffering. Syrians are the ones who, Iranians are out. And who's in? Netanyahu. Wonderful. That's great. That's a big improvement. That's a real big improvement. Are you enjoying it yet? Are you enjoying the Blessed Revolution, the fruits of it? Hopefully Jolani is going to be able to sell your country and you'll get a Starbucks. You'll get a Starbucks that'll open up and you can go drink a overpriced vanilla chai latte at Starbucks. Wow. Isn't that going to be great? Isn't that going to be wonderful? That was worth it, right? Jolani really has your interests at heart. So, inshallah, I'm going to have a stream to analyze Syria in more depth. Maybe tomorrow. Let's see. I might have to do some debate prep tomorrow. But there are some issues to talk about. Okay, last super chat. Muhammad sends 7 Canadian dollars. Appreciate it, bro. And that's our show. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to our newsletter. You can find the link to the newsletter down below. Be on the lookout for our Wahhabism Part 2 documentary. It's going to be about an hour and a half long. It's going to be very well produced, inshallah. It's going to make the Wahhabis scream that the CIA is putting out these videos to attack Wahhabism. Yeah. But yeah, inshallah, you will enjoy it. Hopefully by the end of this week or at the latest early next week, they'll be out. And there's going to be debates and content coming out in the next couple of weeks that you will, inshallah, enjoy. Appreciate you watching the live stream and Haqiqat show. And inshallah, I will see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.